The Thunder Valley Air Show was the biggest event of the year. 50,000 people packed the viewing areas along the runway at Edwards Air Force Base, their faces turned skyward in anticipation. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Veterans wore their unit caps with pride. The smell of hot dogs and popcorn drifted through the warm California air. This was the finale everyone had been waiting for, the F-16 Fighting Falcon demonstration. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, building excitement. He told the crowd they were about to witness the raw power and precision of America's premier multi-role fighter aircraft. The pilot today was Captain Derek Morrison, one of the Air Force's finest demonstration pilots. The sleek fighter jet sat on the taxiway, its metal skin gleaming in the afternoon sun. Ground crew moved around it with practiced efficiency, performing final checks. Captain Morrison was already in the cockpit, running through his pre-flight sequence. The crowd roared with approval as the engines began to spool up, that distinctive high-pitched whine that promised thunder to come. But at the edge of the security perimeter, an old man was trying to push past the barriers. He was thin, probably in his 80s, wearing faded jeans and a leather jacket that had seen better days decades ago. His face was weathered like old boot leather, his hair white and wild. He moved with an urgent, awkward gait, like someone who'd broken too many bones in his youth and never quite healed right. Security Officer James Chen saw him first. The old man was pointing at the F-16, shouting something that was lost in the engine noise and the excited chatter of the crowd. Chen jogged over, his hand instinctively moving to his radio. Chen told the old man this was a restricted area. He needed to return to the spectator zone immediately. The old man grabbed Chen's arm with surprising strength. His eyes were intense, almost wild. He said they had to stop the flight. Right now, something was wrong with the aircraft. Chen felt a chill of alarm. In today's world, someone trying to disrupt a military demonstration and talking about something being wrong with the aircraft set off every red flag. He keyed his radio and called for immediate backup. Possible security threat at the east perimeter. The old man must have heard the change in Chen's tone. He held up his hands, trying to show he wasn't a threat. He said he wasn't trying to cause trouble. He just needed them to listen. That engine sound, it wasn't right. The number 2 turbine bearing was failing. He could hear it. Chen's partner, Officer Rodriguez, arrived at a run, followed by 2 Air Force Security Forces personnel, carrying rifles. The situation escalated in seconds. The old man was now surrounded by 4 armed security officers, and the crowd nearby was starting to notice the commotion. Rodriguez demanded the old man's identification. He asked what he was doing, trying to access a restricted area during an active demonstration. The old man said his name was Benjamin Patterson, and he was trying to stop a crash. Rodriguez exchanged a glance with Chen. They both recognized the behavior. Possible mental health crisis, maybe a veteran suffering from PTSD, triggered by the sounds and sights of the air show. It happened more often than people realized. Rodriguez spoke more gently. He said he understood the old man was concerned, but the aircraft had been thoroughly inspected by certified mechanics. Everything was fine. He needed to come with them now, away from the flight line. Benjamin shook his head frantically. He said they didn't understand. He knew that sound. He'd heard it before in 1978, during the test program. It was a harmonic vibration in the bearing assembly. It starts subtle, almost impossible to detect on instruments, but you could hear it if you knew what to listen for. And when it failed catastrophically. One of the Air Force Security Forces, a young sergeant named Williams, stepped forward. His rifle was lowered but ready. He told Benjamin that he was interfering with a military operation and making threats about the aircraft. He needed to get on the ground now, hands behind his head. Benjamin's face showed pure desperation. He said he wasn't making threats. He was trying to prevent a disaster. If that bearing seized at high G-forces, the pilot would lose control. He'd seen it happen. He'd nearly died when it happened to him. Williams had heard enough. He grabbed Benjamin's arm and started to force him down. The old man didn't resist violently, but he kept trying to turn toward the runway, kept shouting warnings. The commotion was now drawing serious attention. The crowd nearby had gone quiet, watching. Parents pulled their children back. Someone was filming on their phone. The announcer's voice paused, uncertain. A base commander's vehicle screeched to a halt nearby. Colonel Andrea Martinez jumped out, her face tight with controlled fury. She demanded to know what was happening. They were 30 seconds from the demonstration start, and there was a disturbance at her flight line. Williams reported that they had apprehended an individual attempting to access the restricted area and making claims about the aircraft being unsafe. Possible domestic extremist or mentally disturbed individual. Colonel Martinez looked at Benjamin, who was now on his knees, Williams holding his shoulder. The old man looked up at her with those intense eyes. Benjamin said, "Please, just listen to the engine, the oscillation frequency in the secondary turbine. It was off by 0.3%. That meant the bearing was degrading. In his day, they'd grounded birds for less." Martinez felt a flash of anger. She said they didn't ground $50 million aircraft based on the ravings of someone who wandered off the street. Their maintenance crews were the best in the world. If there was a problem, they would have detected it. She ordered security to remove him from the area and hold him for questioning. Possible charges for interfering with military operations and making terroristic threats. Benjamin's voice broke. He said he wasn't a terrorist. He was trying to save that pilot's life. As security dragged him away, he shouted one more thing. He yelled for them to check the maintenance logs. Look for any reported vibration in the past 72 hours, even minor. Check the bearing temps on the number 2 engine, please. But his voice was drowned out by a massive roar as Captain Morrison advanced the throttle. The F-16 began rolling down the taxiway toward the runway. The crowd's attention snapped back to the spectacle they'd come to see. The old man's warnings were forgotten, written off as the sad outburst of someone who'd lost touch with reality. In the security office 100 yards away, Benjamin sat in a plastic chair, his hands shaking. 2 guards stood by the door. Through the window he could see the F-16 lined up on the runway. Chen, who'd been the first to intercept him, felt nagging doubt. There was something about the old man's specificity, the technical details, the way he'd mentioned 1978 and test programs. Chen pulled out his phone and did something he probably shouldn't have. He searched the name. Benjamin Patterson, F-16, test pilot. His screen filled with results. Benjamin Ghost Patterson, one of the original test pilots for the F-16 program at Edwards Air Force Base in the 1970s. Multiple records for high-G testing. Survived a near-fatal crash in 1978 when a turbine bearing failed during a high-speed maneuver. After recovering, he became one of the leading voices on F-16 safety protocols. Chen's blood went cold. He looked up at Benjamin, who was staring out the window at the runway. Chen grabbed his radio and called for Colonel Martinez. Urgent. He'd identified their detainee, and she needed to know immediately. But on the runway, Captain Morrison had already received clearance for takeoff. The F-16's afterburner kicked in with a sound like God tearing the sky in half. The fighter accelerated down the runway, faster and faster, until it rotated and leaped into the air with effortless grace. The crowd erupted in cheers. Morrison climbed steeply, the F-16 clawing toward the sun. He leveled off at 3,000 feet and began his demonstration routine, a slow pass to show the aircraft's profile, a high-speed pass that cracked the air with a sonic boom. The crowd loved every second. In the security office, Chen was talking rapidly to Colonel Martinez over the radio. He told her their detainee wasn't a random crazy person. He was Benjamin Patterson, legendary test pilot, one of the men who literally helped design the F-16 flight envelope. Martinez's response was sharp. She asked why no one had bothered to actually check his identity before dragging him away. Chen said they thought he was disturbed. He was making wild claims about the aircraft. Martinez told him to keep Patterson there. She was coming to the office herself. But first, she was calling the maintenance chief. On the radio frequency, she ordered the demonstration pilot to return to base immediately. Abort the demonstration. Morrison's voice came back, confused. He asked if there was a problem. All systems were green. The aircraft was performing perfectly. Martinez said it was a precautionary abort. Return to base now. That was an order. Morrison acknowledged, though his tone suggested he thought this was an overreaction. He banked the F-16 around, setting up for a landing approach. That's when Benjamin, watching through the window, saw Morrison pull into a tight turn to line up with the runway. The G-forces would spike as he maneuvered. Benjamin closed his eyes. He knew what was about to happen. The sound reached them half a second before the visual. A sharp bang like a gunshot, but deeper. Then the F-16's nose pitched violently downward. One engine flamed out completely, trailing black smoke. The aircraft began to spin. Morrison's voice crackled over the emergency frequency, tense but controlled. He had an engine failure and was losing hydraulics. He was attempting to regain control. The crowd's cheers turned to gasps and then screams. 50,000 people watched as the F-16 tumbled through the sky, Morrison fighting for his life. Benjamin stood up, his eyes locked on the stricken aircraft. He whispered technical instructions under his breath as if Morrison could hear him. Counter the spin with rudder. Don't try to pull up yet. Wait for airspeed. Eject if you can't stabilize. For 10 eternal seconds, the F-16 fell. Morrison worked the stick and rudder with everything he had. At 800 feet, barely enough altitude to matter, the aircraft finally responded. The spin stopped. The nose came up. Morrison had saved it. He brought the crippled fighter in on one engine, hydraulics bleeding, and set it down hard on the runway in a shower of sparks. Emergency vehicles were already racing toward it. Morrison popped the canopy and climbed out, shaking but alive. The silence in the security office was absolute. Colonel Martinez arrived 60 seconds later, her face ashen. She walked directly to Benjamin Patterson and stopped in front of him. She asked him how he knew. Benjamin said quietly that he'd heard it. The bearing oscillation. The same sound he'd heard 46 years ago, right before his own F-16 tried to kill him. He'd broken his back in that crash, spent a year learning to walk again. He'd made it his mission to make sure other pilots never faced what he did. But he'd been retired for 20 years. Nobody knew who he was anymore. Martinez looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She came to attention and rendered a sharp salute. She said she owed him an apology. They all did. And more than that, she owed him the thanks of Captain Morrison, who would be going home to his family tonight because of him. She asked him why he'd come to the air show. Benjamin smiled sadly. He said he came every year. He liked to watch the young pilots fly the planes he'd helped build. He liked to remember when he could fly like that. He never expected to have to save anyone. He'd just been enjoying his hot dog when he heard the engine note go wrong. The investigation that followed confirmed everything Benjamin had said. The number 2 engine's turbine bearing had been degrading for 72 hours. It had been reported by ground crew as a minor vibration, but the diagnostic instruments hadn't flagged it as critical. The bearing was within acceptable tolerance ranges according to the computer, but those tolerances didn't account for the specific harmonic frequency that Benjamin Patterson had learned to recognize half a century ago. A sound that instruments couldn't measure but a trained ear could detect. A sound that meant catastrophic failure was imminent. the Air Force issued a fleet-wide inspection order for all F-16s. They found 3 more aircraft with similar degradation. All were grounded immediately. Colonel Martinez personally drove Benjamin home that evening. On the way, she asked him if he'd consider consulting on their maintenance training program. They clearly had gaps in their institutional knowledge. Benjamin said he'd be honored. He said it was nice to be useful again. A month later, the Air Force held a ceremony at Edwards. Captain Morrison presented Benjamin Patterson with a commendation for preventing a catastrophic accident. The 2 men shook hands, Morrison's eyes bright with unshed tears as he thanked the old test pilot for saving his life. Benjamin was also reinstated as an honorary consultant to the F-16 program. Now, once a month, he walks through the hangars, listening to engines, teaching young mechanics to hear what their instruments can't measure. And at every air show, he gets a reserved seat in the VIP section. Not because he's famous, but because the Air Force learned a hard lesson that day. Sometimes the most important expertise walks in wearing an old leather jacket, and wisdom doesn't always announce itself with credentials. Sometimes it just tries to warn you, desperately hoping someone will listen before it's too late. Benjamin Patterson's story reminds us that we should never be too proud or too busy to listen when someone with experience speaks up, even if they don't look like what we expect a hero to look like. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Valor Chronicles for more stories of the quiet heroes whose knowledge and courage save lives. Tell us in the comments about a time when someone's experience or intuition saved the day. These stories matter. These voices matter.